Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing another top 5 Total War Warhammer video. This time I'm covering the top 5 missing legendary lords in Total War Warhammer 2. So that's to say that lore-wise, influential legendary lords that could have a place and a faction in Warhammer 2 based on the map that's available in Mortal Empires, but yet aren't currently in the game. So with that being said, let's jump in now to number 5. Coming in at number 5 is Crom the Conqueror. Now, placing this guy admittedly is a little bit weird. He's technically of the Kurgan tribes, which is kind of separate from Norscan, but you could sort of lump all of the sort of northern, outside of the full Warriors of Chaos factions together with the Norscans, which they've kind of done over here with like the Hmong and Hung and all those guys out there. They're not really Norscan. They're more like Kurgans, I suppose. So his starting position would be somewhere around here. Now, Crom the Conqueror is most notable, I suppose, for actually beating Grimgor Ironhide in the early end times. Not necessarily beating him in a duel. They sort of ended on a tie, but his warriors defeated his army and Grimgor was forced to withdraw. So he's a pretty damn strong fighter, and he'd probably start over here somewhere. Now, it's quite possible that they're saving this guy for Game 3, because Game 3 will probably feature the Darklands out here, and this would be very much suitable for him. Now, whether or not the Kurgan are going to be a faction in Warhammer 3, I kind of doubt it. I think they'll sort of be lumped in with the Warriors of Chaos or Norscan factions. But I would certainly think that the introduction of Crom the Conqueror into Total War Warhammer, whether it be into 1, 2, or 3, would certainly be a good thing. Anyway, let's now move on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Abarash. Now, Abarash is a vampire lord, but he's quite different from Vlad, Manfred, and Isabella, in that he doesn't crave the blood of mortals because he drank the blood of a dragon. So he's been cured of his red thirst. Now, in my opinion, he's far more influential in the overall end times lore than, for example, Heinrich Himmler or Helmut Gorst. But I can also kind of understand why he's not been introduced into the campaign. He's a bit of a weird one for an undead. All of the other undead ones, they're sort of self-serving and very selfish in their own sort of ways, want to essentially conquer the empire or do some degree of increase their power, where Abarash is actually quite honorable, at least by comparison. In the end times lore, he actually ends up sort of teaming up with Bretonnia itself. But then again, the end times is bloody weird, so just take that with a grain of salt. Now, where would Abarash have his starting position? Abarash is probably going to be somewhere situated over here. Now, the settlement that he would reside in, that it would start in, would be the Bloodkeep, but the Bloodkeep isn't in the game currently. If it was in the game, like I said, it'd be somewhere around here, and I would imagine it'd be a pretty difficult start position due to all these other people out here that would hate you. And it's not like vampire accounts can tunnel in the underway or anything like that. So it'd be a very difficult way for him to fight out. Maybe he'd have to take out the Grimhold out here, or maybe replace the Grimhold with the Bloodkeep so that he could exit the mountains and continue the campaign through there. But that would mean that a province here would be contested by 2 legendary lords. So that could be something of a bit of a conflict there. I don't know if that's a good idea, but anyway, it would be good to see him introduced into Total War Warhammer at some point. I definitely think his introduction could be difficult, but at the same time, he'd be far more influential than someone, say, like the Red Duke. Anyway, the vampire accounts already have 5 legendary lords, and I don't think anyone really needs another vampire or undead faction on the playing field right this very second. Anyway, let's move on now to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is a hero or legendary lord that we might actually be seeing very soon. So it's Volton, who's a hero of the Empire. Now, Volton might end up being like what Croak is to the Lizardmen. He's not necessarily a lord. He's not like the lord of Talabheim or Middenheim or anything like that. He's a hero of the Empire. He doesn't hold any land. He's essentially the avatar of Sigmar, at least until he's killed. And he's notable for killing such characters in the lore as Crom the Conqueror, who got the 5th place, and also for killing Wulfric the Wanderer. And it's quite possible that we will be seeing Volton when I think the Empire will be getting its update in September. But don't hold your breath on it, because there are some conflicts of interest there with Volton, but it could also end up being something quite useful or interesting with this, because Volton has, as his unique weapon, the Galmaraz. Because what ends up happening, I believe, don't quote me on this too much, is that because he's such a great champion of Sigmar or whatever, Karl Franz actually ends up giving him Galmaraz. Now, in the game, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a unique item that could be shared between 2 characters? And it fits, because Karl Franz has 2 unique items. What if he was to get Galmaraz, but Galmaraz could be given to Volton, and then he could simply use his Reichland Runefang, and you could switch it back between the 2 if you really want to. It's something that hasn't been done before. I don't really see it as being something particularly difficult for CA to implement, and it would be really interesting. And the thing is as well, if Volton was a hero instead of a lord, you could actually have Karl Franz and Volton in the same army. I have no idea if that's what's going to happen, but it would be really interesting. Volton has to be in the game at some point, whether it be in Warhammer 2 or in Warhammer 3. It might be more suitable to have him in number 3. I'm not entirely sure though, because number 3 is probably going to be set in the Darklands, so I don't know if they'll be expanding the rosters then. But seeing Volton introduced into the Empire, I think, is a must at some point, and it seems likely that he could be the one that's coming in September. Anyway, let's now move on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Deathmaster Snitch of Clan Eshin. Now, Clan Eshin is one of the 4 major clans of the Skaven, the others being Clan Pestilence, Clan Scryer, and Clan Mulder. Clan Moors is actually not a major clan. Now, of those clans, currently, Clan Pestilence and Clan Scryer is playable, Clan Mulder and Eshin is not. Now, Eshin wasn't even in the campaign to begin with Warhammer 2, both on the Vortex campaign and Mortal Empires, and they were recently introduced with the latest DLC. Now, that sort of leads me to believe that they might soon become playable. And if there was ever going to be a legendary lord associated with Clan Eshin, it has to be Deathmaster Snitch. Now, even though he's not the actual faction leader of that clan, it's actually Lord Sneak. Lord Sneak doesn't do jack shit during the end times, whereas Deathmaster Snitch, this guy gets shit done. And when I say get shit done, he kills people. He's probably got one of the highest kill count of important legendary lords out of anyone in the end times. He's sort of Games Workshop's solution for if you want to kill a character that's got a lot of plot armor, well then you need somebody that's basically got a plot armor weapon, and that's essentially Deathmaster Snitch. Anyone that's just been able to survive any scenario can be killed at any time by Deathmaster Snitch. So notable kills that he got was actually Thorgrim Grudgebearer, after Thorgrim managed to snap Queek Headtaker's head like a twig, and he managed to kill Volton, so the number 3 on the list. So there's basically nobody that is safe from Deathmaster Snitch. If he wants you dead, you fucking die. Now, you could also go the route of having him as a hero, being like the Skaven version of Lord Croak, where he's not actually commanding an army, but he goes around and actually does assassinations, and maybe he can be attached to an army, you know, similar to Croak, or perhaps Volton will be, who knows, depends if they do that or not, because he's not necessarily a commander of armies. It doesn't, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't state anywhere in any situation where you see him command a fight. He simply shows up, kills someone, and then disappears, which is very Skaven of him. So I reckon he's going to show up sometime soon in a DLC. It's just a matter of how is he going to show up, whether it be a legendary lord or a hero. Who knows? Anyway, let's now move on to the number 1 pick. And this guy here is the most likely, I reckon, to show up very soon in Total War Warhammer 2. taking the number 1 spot for the missing legendary lords in Total War Warhammer, it goes to Maloch Darkblade of the Dark Elves. So his starting position would be Hagrief. That's his hold. And it starts off very close to, of course, Nagaron and Harganeth. And that's probably why he hasn't actually been introduced just yet. That's a hell of a lot of Legendary Lord concentration for the Dark Elves. But if you think about it, the Empire has 3 Legendary Lords associated with them just available to Altdorf itself. If you only own Altdorf, you can get those other Legendary Lords. Whereas, with Warhammer 2, things are starting to get more spread out. Now, Maloch Darkblade is a bit of a weird one because he's a very spiteful. He's very much a dark elf. Now he's got a very interesting lore associated with him because he doesn't necessarily just always follow Malekith. His main thing is that he's sort of possessed by a demon and doesn't have his own soul, as far as I'm aware, and does all of these like adventures across the world of trying to rid himself of this demon, which ultimately doesn't work. And then I think he eventually becomes one of Malekith's top lieutenants. So he's a very influential character in the end times, and very powerful character, and he's not currently in the game. One could argue even that he's far more influential than Lokhir Felhart, and even more influential maybe even than Hellebron for that matter. So I think they've been saving him for something special. Perhaps a DLC campaign pack just with him, where he goes and does something similar to what the Vampire Coast does, where they go on an adventure to secure the Pieces of 8 sort of thing. I think that would be very fitting for a Maloch Darkblade campaign. I don't think it would fit for him to care about the Vortex campaign. It just doesn't really seem to fit. But he's definitely in my opinion, the number 1 missing Legendary Lord, and I think he's actually going to be introduced in the next DLC for Total War Warhammer. That's my guess. I could be completely wrong. It's just a guess. But out of all the Legendary Lords that are currently in the game, because there's no more race packs, it's only new lords. Out of all the races, it seems to me like there's a glaring hole in the Dark Elves, which only a Maloch Darkblade sized piece can really fit in at Hagrief there. Anyway, that's my list. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if there's any Legendary Lords that you think are more important than the ones that I've introduced, especially the number 1 and number 2 list, that could be introduced into Total War Warhammer 2 as of right now. So that is to say, like, factions that currently exist, which would have their Legendary Lord attached to them, but is currently not in the game. Anyway, with that being said, that's the end of this one, and I'll see you next time, fuckers.